www.offthecorner.net. You're watching the Fact Project here on Full Blast Radio. And FACT is an acronym that stands for Fundamental African Centered Thought. The goal here on the FACT Project is to convey some facts and some information to members of our community. We have with us our reoccurring guest every first Monday of the month, educator, author, activist, creator of Harlem Liberation School and Black Liberation University, Brother Ajay Taimba. Peace, Brother Ajay. Thank you for getting on with us today.
Peace, brother. How you be?
I'm doing well, brother. It's good to see you back in full strength, man.
Yes, sir. It's good to be back.
Okay. So, you are not just an author and activist or someone that does podcasts and so forth, but or a YouTube channel, but you're also involved in a lot of activism. And I understand now that you're involved in some activism around Syracuse University. What can you tell us about that?
Well, back in the day, about 30 odd years ago, I was an undergraduate student at Syracuse University. And at that time, I was a member of and later became the president of the Student African American Society, which is like our Black student union. And I was also a writer for the Black Voice newspaper. So in that capacity as the president of the Student African American Society, probably, I believe, the year 88, 89, we did a poll amongst our members to say, what is the issue you think is most important, most pressing that we should address? And overwhelmingly, the surveys came back our African American Studies department. So the constituents, not we, decided what the issue was. And we followed their lead, and we did a year-long campaign to, I guess you could say, our parents' generation in the 60s, like all over the country, Black students in college fought for Black Studies departments. And now you can consider my generation would have been their children's generation now in the 80s coming back and saying, okay, our parents fought for this, but now it's dilapidated. Y'all are not keeping your word to maintain it. So now we're coming to make sure that you keep your word and make sure that these departments are viable and functional and teaching, have good professors and innovative research and are mentoring we students. And so it was a lot of issues wrong. No chairperson, no librarian for the library. It was a bunch of stuff. Didn't have enough courses, and it was just ridiculous. Anyway, we did a year-long campaign. We eventually disrupted all their meetings and held them hostage and took over the white history classes and all types of stuff. And finally, we brought them to the negotiation table. We got 13 demands. We got them all met, at least on paper. Some of them still have not been done, but the vast majority have. And that was that. That was 1988 or 89. So you can imagine how I'm feeling when I get a text. I'm getting texts all day on my phone, brother, from former classmates sending me this link to this article. The Daily Orange is the name of the newspaper on Syracuse University's campus. And though it's a college newspaper, it's a very prominent newspaper. A lot of those guys and young ladies leave there and go on to big journalist jobs. So basically, I found out that some of the issues we fought against were reoccurring. They don't have a chairperson. They don't have a librarian for the library. There's not enough courses being taught. They need to hire more professors. The department nominated a chair. The university said, no, we don't want them. So there's a lot going on. And I frame it as larger than just what's happening at Syracuse University. It's an issue that's nationwide. And it's an issue that is worldwide. And it's an issue that goes back centuries. Namely, it is the white attempt to erase, cancel, destroy, limit, restrict Black voice and Black agency, particularly when it's not talking about what dance is out, what's the latest clothing item, but it's talking about how we get free. They don't like those voices. They don't like voices of Black resistance. So anything they can do, this includes the attack on Black studies departments, as we all see. This includes people in Florida and California and Arizona create, and actually 32 states banning books by black authors. This includes people in about 16 states writing laws to prohibit what they call critical race theory. It's really just critical race theory only exists in college. It doesn't exist in grade school. For those of you watching, your little kid that's in K through 12 isn't getting critical race theory. That doesn't happen until they go to college. Because the white man doesn't know. He thinks everything we do is all, he lumps it all in one thing. He calls it critical race theory. So there's an attack in certain states, brother. If you're a teacher, like I'm a classroom teacher. In certain states, if I go in my class, which I always do, and teach them, I interweave our history, I can lose my job in those states, and I could go to jail because they've listed that as a felony. So people tend to compartmentalize everything. No, it's not individual. It's an attack on black voice and agency and black resistance. That's all it is, in a new way, in a new form.
You mentioned critical race theory. You said that's not something until you don't get that until you get to college, but you actually don't get that until you get to law school. So you can finish college and never even hear anything about critical race theory. But you're saying this is a nationwide campaign, and we see it especially in the state of Texas and the state of Florida. They don't go after Chinese history. They're not going after East Indian history. They're not going after anyone else's history, trying to delete their history. Why the assault on black people and black history?
Well, on a very kind of cultural level, personal level, it's the same reason why you don't get excited about the Chinese party. You don't get hyped up about the Arab fight. Nobody's looking at no disrespect to my Latino brethren, the Dominican restaurant. Everybody wants to know what's going on with the black party, with the black celebrities, with the black clothing, with the black fashion, with the black music, man, because we are where the action is. On a very culturally arrogant tip, I gotta say that, man. We are what it is, man. It is what it is. And the whole world knows that. They don't want to admit that. But part of this is an envy on a real personal level. Racism on a very personal level, brother, it's about envy. It's about, damn, how they so statuesque and resilient and intelligent and innovative after all we put them through. How they going to outer space? How they starting new academic departments? How they making machines that put the sole to the shoe to the rest of the shoe? How is this possible? What do we have to do to destroy them? And, like the Babyface kids, man, we don't die, we multiply.
Yeah,
and I think that disturbs people, man, at a really kind of primitive animal-like level. And then, of course, at the political level, it's not all black activity. It's the resistant. It's black resistant activity, or any activity that said people think will inculcate a spirit of resistance, a spirit of, why is the government treat us this way? Why are there only two parties? We got freedom of speech. Why is the guy that was president and actually started a riot, which is actually traitorous activity, and has defrauded business stuff and has been sexually assaulting to women? How is he even able to still run for president? So they don't want people like us to raise those questions, because why are we the people that die earliest in the entire world? How is it possible? Right? Are we the only ones that have so-called bad diets? We the only ones that don't get enough exercise? No. So you start putting these things together when you ask those questions, because remember, intelligence and wisdom doesn't come from your answers. A lot of people have answers and they're wrong. It comes from the questions you raise. You start questioning things, and those good questions cause you to study and connect with people, and it leads you to the correct answers. They don't want us to ask the questions because they know as long as we keep, partying. What did Biggie say? Partying bullshit. And where did Biggie get it from? The Last Poets. Party and bullshit and party. See? So even Biggie understood that, as he was complicit in it. He still understood the dynamic. So they try to keep us in that. In the sports. Keep us in the the gossip, keep us in whatever, anything but why are we not eating right? Why do those people eat well? Why do we see political organizations over there and ideologies and religious systems that's working for them? What they believe works for them. Why does this not seem to gel for us? And when you ask those questions, those answers are going to produce, hopefully, radical revolutionary type thinking. We got to change some of these things that are here. I think that's why, brother, in a nutshell.
Okay. The great Martin Luther King once said, your boycott, your not boycott, but he said your demonstration, your protest, whatever you're campaigning for or against, should be anchored to economic withdrawal, meaning boycott. And so the campaign against Syracuse University right now, what is the or else? Like, we want the Black Studies Department, and if we don't get it, we will go to this next strategy. What is the or else in the campaign?
Well, I want to answer this very carefully, because although I'm not particularly important in any way, I'm another grain of sand on the beach of life. There are some people who see what I say as being important because of my activism at Syracuse, and they read they're reading my articles, brother. They're watching them videos. They're trying to take notes. So I don't want to necessarily get into too much strategic stuff in a public venue, but I will say, right now, the issue is about holding the university accountable to those 13 points they agreed to. And this is not for those who are watching. They got a problem with people who protest. Oh, black people shouldn't be protesting. Ask the white man. Listen. We colonized. Stop it. We're colonized people. Everything that we have comes from white folk. Ain't nobody so great, smart, intelligent, and talented that they didn't go to white people for jobs or got to follow their laws or go to their jails if they don't. We're all under that until we have national liberation. So this means we all make compromises every day. That's why the money in our pocket got white men's faces on it. Right? That's why our kids are celebrating their holidays more than Kwanzaa. Don't even know about Kwanzaa. Because we're colonized. So once we understand that, it means, we got to fight. We're going to use some of their tools until we build our own, until we're free. But this issue is about people in the 60s listening to Malcolm. Malcolm shot dead. So the young people was listening to Malcolm. And they said, we're going to carry out what that brother didn't get to do. And that's why there was a whole Black Power movement in the first place, and Black Arts movement. So they came to these campuses like, we want Black studies. Why not? They're paying money. These are not empty. These are not people that just kind of camp out on these campuses, right? And had no stake. These are people paying thousands of dollars. So they're saying, if we're paying money, we have a stake, and we want this type of education. We want an education that's relevant to us, so we can go back to our communities and use this, not just a bunch of flim-flam, and it's important to note that some of our integrationist leaders at the time were dead against Black studies. Roy Wilkins, wow. I can keep going, a lot of them.
Wow.
You could do the research. A lot of them were against Black. They thought it was just a bunch of celebratory stuff. Who came first and we're bad. And it was, no, it's a whole discipline. This is not just Black history, So at Syracuse, this is about, I paid dues there, good brother. I couldn't just go like white kids. I couldn't just go to school and go to class. And that's all. And whatever else they do. I couldn't do that because we were so busy fighting and every year I was in school, I was protesting. Every year, from freshman all the way through the senior year. I paid dues, and many of us did, and we want our return, damn it. So for people watching, think this is about some integrationist thing, not at all. Not at all. Wherever we are, we must bend the world to our will. Wherever we are.
So if you stirred the pot every year you were there, they were glad to see you leave.
Oh, speaking of that, the Dean of Arts and Sciences at the time, as I crossed the stage and got the diploma. I literally said, I've never been happier to see a student get out of here. Good
Wow.
luck. Just
Wow.
like that. That's
Wow.
a fact.
Wow.
So yes, but it's not about me. This is about people understanding what's at stake. I hear a lot of nationalists in the community, and you know I'm nationalist, and probably I believe I was born a nationalist. And probably will die a nationalist, but I see room for, we have to be critical. And some of us think the only relevant contribution in the Black liberation movement is you got to build a house. You got to get the hammer. You got to get the nails and the wood. You got to build that house with your bare hands. Or you got to have the military. You got to be shooting anybody that comes to offend us. If self-defense. Or you got to be growing food. And they don't understand. Nations need a whole bunch of things. Not just defense, not just agriculture, right? We need education. Doesn't this country have an education department? We need defense. We need economy. So everybody's not going to be in the woods sniping at people, and everybody's not. It's not going to be on some house on the prairie building homes and growing food. Some of us will be intellectuals, and our work or active resistance is intellectual resistance. And it kills me when I hear my brothers and sisters devalue the intellects, because they're quick to quote all the intellects. John Henry Clark said, Dr. Ben said, Chancellor Williams said. They're quoting all these intellectuals, but then on the other hand, they devalue them. So I want to make sure we get that point, that there's room in this struggle for everybody. It's funny, I was at church with my mother and my wife, and the preacher's banging on, be careful who you telling who's qualified, and don't exclude people, and da-da-da. And he's right and exact. He said there's room for everybody. Yeah, I've been saying the same thing from a nationalist point of view. That just ain't in the church. Means that there's room in the struggle for writers, for actors, for people who sing. In the 60s, we had freedom singers. We had Sweet Honey in the Rock. So who's to say that our sisters and brothers that can sing and do poetry can't form groups and be in our neighborhoods entertaining the people righteously? Who's to say that that's not work? Yeah, that's work, right? And we need people who have the mind to govern large enterprises, not our little households. People that know how to govern large-scale enterprises like post offices and government structures. We need that. So a lot of our finest minds that help us understand this are coming out of the academy, whether we like it or not. And Malcolm, so people say, well, Malcolm didn't come from the academy. No, he didn't. But who was Malcolm getting schooled by?
Dr. Clark?
Yes, sir. See, so we have to be humble enough to know we are specks of sand on the beach. We are important to ourselves and our immediate families. But in the whole scheme of things, we ain't the only ones that's smart and got talent. There's millions of us that got talent, and it's up for the leadership to be able to put these people together, to connect them in a way that things get done, agendas get advanced. So my beef has never been with our people, our rank and file. The beef is always with the leadership, the people who are entrusted and who have been supposedly educated or trained to help organize people.
Okay, now what can people watch and do to help you in your campaign against Syracuse University, trying to eliminate the Black Studies department?
Well, for those watching who don't know, they didn't have a chairperson. So there's a bunch of things wrong with in the department. But the main thing was they need a chairperson, because without the chairperson, you can't do a lot of departmental things. You can't do curriculum changes. You can't hire more professors. You can't chart a new course, a vision for the department. You can't deal with budget. So our main thing was, although there's like 13, 14, 15 things, we got to start with the chair. So the university wisely, after a whole lot of pressure, We had people doing videos. We sent them videos to them. People on videos like, I didn't go to Syracuse, but I understand that they're not doing this with the department. They need a chair and ending it like that. People calling the dean, calling the provost, calling the chancellor. So now what did they do? They appointed an interim chair. This means somebody that will be there for like 2 years until they get a permanent chair. So that's a victory, but it's a compromise victory. Because when they appointed the chair, they didn't ask the department, who do you think should be your interim chair? They appointed one, right? So, but we hope that the brother they appointed will do right by the faculty, the department, the students, and the alumni. We certainly going to work with him to make sure that he's doing what he needs to do. But in the meantime, people, how they can help is stay empowered, stay educated on the issue. If you go to Harlem Liberation School's YouTube channel, you'll see different videos about it. If you type in Syracuse African American Studies Department, you'll see all types of issues and articles about it. And by staying in touch with the issue, I believe that knowledge can be empowering. It's not necessarily power, but it can empower you if you use it right. So I always encourage people, before you get anything, do the research so you know what you're getting into and who the players are and what it's about. That's what I would say for now.
Okay. Now, is it customary for a department to not have a chair?
It is not customary for them to not have a chair for this long. Now, when I was in school, they didn't have a chair for 3 years. Can you imagine 3 entire years? In this case, it's been several months. But no, it's not good. And I should also say to those watching, we have to be savvy. When you see things happening, don't just react to what's happening. First, ask yourself, like chess, why did he move there? What's he attacking? Can I protect it? If he takes the piece, can I take his piece back? If I take his piece back, is it an even swap? Or does he get the better at the deal, or do I get the better at the deal? You're always asking questions, right? And that's gonna prove very helpful. When a university knows what it needs to succeed, it knows what departments need to succeed, and it also knows if we starve a department of a chair, if we don't allow them access to their own funds, if we deny every request that they make to us, if we make it seem like, man, you guys are dysfunctional, y'all can't get it together, you're mismanaging, they're going to starve, they're going to kill it by acts of omission. We always talk about the acts of commission, what somebody did, but sometimes what somebody fails to do can kill you too. Right? So if you fail to take your medication and you got serious issues, you're killing yourself. It's not what you did, it's what you failed to do. And that's why the white man's law recognizes abuse as not just being punching somebody, shooting them, but negligence. And what we're arguing is that the university is guilty of negligence, that they are deliberately withholding resources and leadership from the department, knowing that it will inevitably lead to the department's road to demise.
Yeah,
but they're setting it up for that.
Okay, and what was taught in the African American studies? Was it civil rights movement, Black Power movement, Black arts movement? What did they teach?
Oh man, I'm gonna hold. This is a shameless plug, but this is my latest book, Leadership. If you look at the faces on here, they taught everybody on this cover.
Okay.
As a summary, I mean, we learned about African civilization.
Okay.
We learned about pre-colonial. Then we learned about the colonial period and how white people came in and why they came in and the techniques they used to exploit and oppress us. We learned about our resistance movements all the way into the Americas. Because, African American studies, Africana studies, Black studies is centered on what I would call the new African experience after Africa. Africa and the new Africans here in the United States. That's where it centers. And then it does have discussions of diaspora and things as well.
Okay, now,
so
go ahead.
You're talking about the history, culture, pop, brother. I learned about jazz music.
Wow.
I mean, it's history, it's culture, and it's politics. So that covers a lot of ground, right? Yeah, so you learn a lot in African American studies. And I want to say this. I'm not somebody who looks to white people as our savior. but many of us do. So for those of you who do, I think you should know this. Black studies doesn't just deeply impact our people. It sensitizes whites who, without exposure to it, might be straight up slave master type racists. It's sensitized. They learn, oh wow, I didn't they learn, and some of them become soldiers, if you will, in their own right, to write letters to the government to release Mumia Abu Jamal. Some of them joined the National Jericho movement, fighting for black political. So don't underestimate the power of education. I'm gonna end with this on this question. There's a lady named Margaret, can't remember her last name. She's the ex-wife of the founder of Amazon, Jeff Bezos. She's worth about 400 something billion, I think. She's loaded. As an undergraduate, she wanted to be a novelist. As an undergraduate, who's she rolling with? Who's her mentor? Toni Morrison.
Wow. Wow.
So Toni Morrison schooling her. You know, Toni Morrison didn't play as a professor or writer. So she's schooling her for years. Boom, boom, boom. Writes her a letter of recommendation to get the job where she met Jeff Bezos.
Wow.
Her future husband wrote her recommendation, called and left the message and everything.
Wow.
So what does this white girl do? She's written about 50 books. She's a novelist, but she's become a big time philanthropist. And where does most of her money go? To historically black universities. I'm talking about, brother, she's giving 50 million here, 40 million here, 20 million here. Why? Would she have taken that position? First of all, would she be in that position if it weren't for Toni Morrison? And secondly, her politics. Now, is she a Sada Shakur? No, and we don't expect her to be. But because of her mentorship, that relationship she had with a down black woman, Toni Morrison, respect to her, rest in power for sure. Her consciousness raised, and when now she got consciousness and she got power with the money, who she think to give it to? So I want people to understand that when you touch black people, you touching the world, because our fingers are on the pulse of everything.
Yeah. So you went to Syracuse University, which is not an HBCU, it's a PWI. And
that's right.
They're trying to, prevent us from knowing our history and our culture and so forth. What is the importance of us having our own schools?
Very good question. And we got to nuance that. The answer is nuanced because remember, we are a colonized people. So when we say our own schools, is Hampton our own schools? My uncle went to Hampton, and my great aunt taught at Hampton. Number of people I know went to Clark, went to different black schools. Here's the thing. Those schools were started in the Reconstruction period mostly by white union members, people who were down at the Freedmen's Bureau, and were named after white people. Right? So I want people to watch, to really understand the nuance involved. Everything isn't always this or that. There's a lot of complexity involved with this. Furthermore, those who are politically active in historically black colleges will tell you because they're so dependent on white philanthropy, they're very conservative when it comes to the black activists. I knew one sister who told me they kept her transcripts for years after she graduated and would not release them.
Wow. Why is that?
Because of her political activism on the campus.
Wow, okay.
And Spike Lee tried to show us this in his movie School Days, because he went to Morehouse. And his boy, Sam Jackson, was down with the Black Student Union and got kicked out of school at Morehouse for his political activism.
Wow.
They don't play that, man. Your name on the list, you out. So I will say this, though. All things being considered, they're better than white schools because they do at least have a large pool of black professors, faculty, and staff that look upon these students not just as students, but almost like they're surrogate kids, like their nieces, nephews, and cousins. So my uncle would tell me stories. Of course, he had the weird situation of having his actually family member being one of his professors. So of course she was on him. But he used to say like the professors would catch up with you like, hey, what's going on with you? I didn't see like have those real discussions like, nah, man. I know you didn't feel good. Guess what? It's gonna be a lot of times you don't feel good, but you're gonna still have to do things in life. And so they would have those pep talks. Every Sunday they would go to chapel. Now, I'm not necessarily the biggest cheerleader for Christianity as taught by white folk and brought here, interpreted by them. But I do believe whatever you believe in, you got to have a spiritual system that grounds you and makes life have meaning for you, that gives you an ethical compass. And in these black schools, you have to go to chapel every week. I mean, think about that. So whether we agree with the whole, Christianity thing or not, we know it comes from Africa. Anyway, they're trying to teach them what they consider to be wholesome, ethical grounding so that as they go through life, they will have that extra force behind them, And so I like to think those things are really important. My mother went to, she grew up in Montgomery, Alabama, so she went to all segregated schools. And then she eventually went to F.A.C.T. And she tells me that both in elementary, at high school, and then when she went to F.A.C.T., those professors poured into them. They built up their spirits. They built up their spirit to resist. They taught them to be proud. They taught them to be studious. Be on time. Don't slack. Don't be a sluggard. Don't be niggardly. Like, handle your business. Because this is what's at stake. We have to work hard and this and that. Right? And she was so impressed by her teachers, brother, that my government names, the name she named me, my first and last name, were the names of black male teachers in her life. That's how much they impacted my mom. And I can say the same for me. I'd also say, so we should always have our own family. But listen, when we say our own in a colonized context, that means it's out of our mind, it's from our heart, but it's not completely our own because it's under the jurisdiction and auspices of other people. That doesn't mean we should not have that. That's a step up. But just remember that our black schools are, look, some of them are giving my scholarships to white folk, family. Minority scholarship. You see? Because the black alums have to give more money. They're not giving enough money, so they're going to white folk, corporations, the Apollo Theater. Every time I go by the Apollo Theater, I look at the little ticker on the thing. It says, "We thank Coca-Cola. We thank Bill Gates. We thank," yeah. And you can't get mad because if you ain't giving them the money, they're gonna go get the money where they can get it.
Right.
The African American Museum in D.C. Beautiful. But if you look at the different floors and you see the people that contributed, Bill and Melinda Gates, all these different people, like, whoa. So it's always going to be like that when we don't have national liberation, right?
Yeah,
So we should go for our own, but we ultimately have to always be fighting for national liberation. So we have true sovereignty. So we wake up and we know what it feels to really, we can say that is really our school. That's really our community. That's really our governmental system. Right now, when we say it, it's more symbolic than substantial, to be honest.
You mentioned segregated schools. Now, some of the best minds we produce in America went to segregated schools. So you had people like Granville Woods, Benjamin Banneker, Lewis Latimer, Elijah McCoy. These were some of our greatest inventors. They never went to white schools. So do you think it's a better idea to have segregated schools and have our own everything because we produce such genius when we do?
Well, that has nuance too. Segregation, for those watching, segregation is different from people who decide this is we're going to have our own thing. Segregation is forced on you by an oppressor, and usually the idea is that whatever this resource is, they're going to have the best of it and they're going to give you the worst of it. So, for instance, my mother would say that they had the desk was old and rickety, or they didn't have enough desks for everybody, or the books would be rickety. The books that that the white folks passed down, they may be outdated. So understand that's different from us saying, let's have our own, right? That means we have collectively decided we're going to do our own thing versus somebody else decided it for us and forced it on us. Now, Du Bois wrote a famous article back in the 30s when he argued that he used the term self-segregation, but what he really meant was having our own. And of course, that's always ideal. But remember, I think, and this is just my historical opinion, but I think the thing that accounts for all those brilliant new Africans was the intense persecution. The fact, segregation being one part of that. It's the fact that you can go out and be lynched at any moment. It's the fact that you had to cross the street. You had to look down and avert your eyes when you're talking to some white person. You could be 80 years old and a 4-year-old kid could say boy, call you boy, and you had to eat all that, right? You'd be overqualified and couldn't get certain employment or certain grants or whatever. So it's the intense repression forces people to dig deep. It forces people to come together. Look, if you can't go, look, let's think about it. If there was no segregation in the 50s and before that, black middle class people that was getting their money from teaching or getting money from carpentry or plumbing or wherever they got it, would they have spent all that money in the black community? I don't know. Right?
Right.
But they didn't have the option to spend it out the black community.
That's
So
right.
what it does is it forces a certain cohesiveness, but it also forces a lust for what the enemy got. So we got to watch that too. You know, when you tell kids, for instance, those of you parents or teachers or whatever, don't do this. Oh man, the more you tell them that's off limits, don't you turn to that channel. The more it's like, what's up with that channel?
Right? Yeah.
So there's a little double thing there. But personally, brother, I think if Africa were left alone, I'm gonna take it all the way back, way before this period. If Africa were left alone and white people came there as they did originally just to learn, sit at our feet and learn, and didn't get into this hegemonic situation, domination and all that, and Africa would have been allowed to grow and progress, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. And yes, we would be doing our own thing. And I guess it would be some level of integration because we live in a multiracial society. So there'd be some white people in some of our stuff, I'm sure, and some different people, but we would be empowered. But unfortunately, we'll never know now because now we're kind of responding to what was done then. Everything is a response to that. You know, right. So Walter Rodney, if you haven't read his book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, you got to read that. It's just to wrap your mind around how what they did impacts Africa to this day. Like Africa is, without question, in terms of mineral resources, the richest territory in the world. And white people have been stealing from Africa since the 1500s. And it's still, listen, I want you to wrap your mind around that, and it's still the richest continent in the world. After all those centuries of theft, the oil, the gold, the diamonds, right? It's still. So that tells you, man, Africa is loaded. And yet, most of the people are living in squalor. Now, that's a result of the black neo-colonial leadership that works with the white man. And that's a result of white people had a head start. Compete.
Yeah,
when people look at Africa, it's like I say it like this. You got a relative, had a doctorate degree, owned businesses, employed black people, was down with a revolutionary organization protecting people. He was the man when he was 20. But unfortunately, he got on that heroin. And so now when people see him, say, oh, look at that dude. He's washed up begging for money, stink, you know. And then an elder got to remind the kid, yeah, watch how you speak about Mr. So-and-so. He was down with the Black Liberation Army. He actually had businesses employing us. He took people off the streets. He got his education, right? So we got to tell people that what you see now is not necessarily reflective of who we really are and who our ancestors really are. What you're seeing now is the effect of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of colonization and some of the most despicable and vulgar violence you could ever imagine, and what that does to people, to their psyche. Right? So people need to remember that when you're looking at this, where would Africa be if it was left alone? That would be a hell of a movie for those of y'all who write movies. That'd be a hell of a movie or a book to actually write. What would it be like? And I think it might be like, and I know this is a metaphor, Wakanda. It's a metaphor. That's extreme. But yeah, when we're in power and we doing stuff and running, yeah, it would probably be like that.
Interesting.
Right? It's something to think about.
Absolutely. I like that idea, that concept. Now,
Yeah.
Brother Ajay, we just passed the birthday of Mumia Abu Jamal. He turned 70, and he's been in prison now for 41 years, if I got that number
41,
right.
42.
41 or 42. As we just passed the birthday of Mumia Abu Jamal, what are your thoughts on him and his plight and his situation?
Man, Mumia Abu Jamal is really fascinating. He's like a Jamal Joseph, just that he was in Philly, if I'm correct. Jamal Joseph was a New York brother. But Jamal Joseph was like 16 in the Black Panthers. And Mumia Abu Jamal was about 15 or 16. He's one of the founding members of Philadelphia's Black Panther Party branch. That's big. He was in high school demanding that the high school rename itself after Malcolm X in high school. So he dealt with government repression from day one. And he was, by the way, he was kicked out of school. Right? So he's been doing this for decades. Right? And then, of course, he becomes this wonderful radio personality, becomes an investigative journalist in Philly. And because he's a Panther, right, he's investigating stuff like government malfeasance, misusing of funds, police brutality, right? He's exposing all of these stories. And he was a very strong defender of the MOVE organization, which, Mayor Wilson Good in Philadelphia bombed their house after complaints that they were dirty or whatever their complaints were. Most people think it was politically motivated, and we know it was. Many people died. Some people went to jail. Some people just got out of jail. And you got people like Pam Africa that's been representing them strong for decades. But the point is, when a lot of them milk toast people in Philly was running for the covers and hiding and didn't want anything to say, Brother Mumia Abu Jamal was speaking up on that and exposing that. And then he got set up. They then accused him, I think in 81, 82, that he killed a cop. Came up, shot a cop in the face. And there's a lot more to that, family. His brother, they shot his brother. There's a lot going on with that. The point here is that they framed him up like they tried to do Asada. Like they did our good brother who is H-Rap Brown. Right? How they did my Baba and Jegna brother Daruba bin Wahad and had him in jail for 19 years. They set you up, right? Then they put you away, lock away the key and hope, and they bank on the fact that our lack of consciousness and community organizing skill and appetite will allow them to just languish there forever. So this brother has had hepatitis C. They wasn't giving him his medication. The brother done lost. Him from the locks back in the 80s and 90s. He's losing his hair. He's doing bad, very poorly, health-wise. And he's right, just like I said, we're colonized. If we're colonized, what do you think people in captivity in the Americans' jails and prisons are? Wow, I can't imagine. I just can't even imagine the horrors to know that you got a sickness and you can't even trust that you'll get medication or proper medical care. So he's going through it. I was actually checking out some stuff and I was giving thought to how to be more engaged and involve myself in the issue of our political prisoners, because you can't wear shirts with people's face on it and quote them and they get locked up and you and you do nothing to help them. It's similar to how people say how much they love Harriet Tubman and Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey, but they're not doing their work. That always tickled me. Well, if you love Malcolm, why aren't you trying in some way to replicate what he was doing? It doesn't have to be identical. But wouldn't you think a student of John Henrik Clarke or Garvey or X would be trying to bring into existence what they did? So it's kind of saddening. It speaks to, as much as I can bang on the white man, and I will continue for the rest of my days, not letting him off the hook. It speaks to how we gotta look at ourselves, and we gotta ask the critical questions: am I doing all I can? Am I using my God-given abilities to the best of my ability? Can I reach farther? I'm reaching here, but can I, if I was to organize better, can I reach farther? I'm feeding 10 people, could I feed 30? Like constantly saying, and I know when I look at, every time I see his name mentioned, I go, damn, what could Harlem Liberation School or organizations like us, or what could we do to be more present and engaged in that? Because that's very important. I think about it. I've had medical issues, as you know. If I'm sick and shut in and I'm infirmed, who's gonna come and be like, "Yo, IJ, man, you eating all right? They treating you good?" Calling, "Hey, brother, you all right? Yeah, you want me to come visit?" And if no one does that, how does that make me feel? Does that contribute to my slow death? I'm sure it does.
Mm.
Look at Dr. Ben. Very sad how he goes out in a nursing home. People coming, taking pictures with him from out of state, trying to say that he's their teacher and it is his student. Like, when I see that, it makes me think, gotta do more. I'm constantly saying I gotta do more. Gotta do better. Gotta do more. There's a lot. And I know I'm just one person, but just saying we. So when I think of Mamiya, I think of we have to do better with that. You
Absolutely.
know, and
And
maybe we need to go back to the Asada Shakur days and start breaking people out of jail. I don't know. This is
that's funny.
ridiculous, though. Yeah.
We're coming up in 2 weeks on the birth anniversary of Malcolm X. Now, many of us, that came up at a certain time, like if you got knowledge yourself, it began for you with Malcolm X. And then we get like reflective around that time of his birth. So, what are your thoughts this year around the birth of Malcolm X?
And Malcolm Malcolm X is the reason, outside of my father, of why I'm even doing what I do. Because I read his book, Malcolm X Speaks, maybe 12 or 13, man, and it just was like, my father was telling me about this guy, but when I read all those speeches, I was like, whoa, I gotta be like this guy some way. I know I'm not gonna be like him, completely like him, but I gotta, in some way, writing books, learning more, being articulate, being able to articulate our pain and articulate some remedies, some strategies, some liberation theories. And so, what he was for me, he was for millions of people. Millions of people have similar stories. They may have been older or younger than me, but the story is centrally they were exposed to him, and it changed the way they looked at things. It kind of uh, uh, caused them to reimagine things. It caused them to want to be better. That he had that type, and that's a spirit. That's a profoundly spiritual piece that we don't talk about. In Africa, we didn't separate spiritual and political, right? Here, we put them in, oh, that's political. No, it's when you see somebody leave the life he led, that's spiritual. When you see somebody that makes that move and never goes back, that's spiritual. You see somebody eats one meal a day and gets 4 hours of sleep and is traveling all over the country, that's spiritual. That's not just political. And that's actually all one thing anyway. Right? So for a lot of us, he represents that African cosmology that we lost. These things ain't separate. Your spirituality is expressed in your politics. Huh? Your spirituality is expressed in getting up in the morning, expressed in how we deal with people, expressed in our activity or lack thereof. And he represents that. Like, he was imperfect, we know that, but he's so complete in so many areas. And it's no wonder that, I don't know if you call this person a coroner or the medical examiner, but the person that saw his body and this is a matter of document. This is a historical document. Said he had the cleanest body I've ever seen. That sounds a little weird, but I think that spirit is that he was a genuine person, man. That's what that reads to me. And this guy has examined millions, hundreds and thousands of bodies, right? He's saying this is the clean. He to the point where he had to say that. He couldn't believe it, he said. Almost like a glow, huh? So I think about making sure representing the best of Africa, the best of our ancestors, because I'm not foolish enough to think everything we did was perfect. I mean, but the best of our people and our ancestors, and representing it now and modeling it so people could see. You say you fighting for us. What does fighting mean? What does one have to do to fight well? And he's a good example. If you don't have a lot of time, if I'm on my deathbed and I got 3 breaths left, look at Malcolm X. Look at Malcolm, and you'll learn a lot of what you need to know just from studying him. And so, but one thing I think about, because Malcolm was the one that was saying we need a cultural revolution and a physical revolution, and that we need to have an education that teaches us about the greatness of our past, but also helps us to answer questions, helps us to fight more effectively, be analytical. And he's the reason all these hundreds of thousands of students fought for Black studies. He's the reason so many people go back and reading all these books, because he said that reading is fundamental to being a revolutionary or a humanitarian. And so when I think about the attack on the Black authors and the banning of books and the attack on Black studies and what they call critical race theory, he comes to mind. And it shows us, for those who are anti-intellectual, who think, oh, reading is not important. Oh, man, you ain't got to read, man. We just got to go ahead and just kill a white man. We ain't got to read. We just got to build schools. We got to build, grow food. He's a reminder, like the things that he's calling for and that our parents' generation fought for are the things they're going at so hard. Why are they going at why are they banning these books? Why are they going at the Black authors so hard? Why are they going at the teaching of Black studies? Why is that so threatening? And if people give that question a good pondering, they're going to say, wow, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I need to stop being so anti-intellectual. Clearly, there's something about learning, depending on what we're learning and who from and for what reason, that can be really revolutionary and that may have answers and may be threatening to the people that are colonizing me. So I think about those questions right now, because all that's going on in my own life, in my own kind of cipher. And I think about Malcolm's, what his take would have been on that.
Now, Brother Ajay, you know me. I believe in Kuji Chagulia, self-determination.
Yes, sir.
A lot of people among us say that we should petition the system to get Malcolm X Day recognized as a federal holiday. I celebrate it without having to ask anybody's permission. So what is your opinion on that idea of trying to get Malcolm X Day to be a federal holiday? Would that be good or bad?
Let me say this. I definitely believe in self-determination, so much so I changed my names back in 1991. I changed my names to say I disavow these names. And even though my mother named after beautiful Black men and she was disappointed with me, I didn't want nothing to do in terms of my naming with them. And tattoos on my body are reflecting of Africa and New African politics and theology, cosmology. But I also understand people represent self-determination in different ways. Everybody doesn't change their name, but they may try to start a school or a business or a broadcast. And these are different ways, or wear African clothes. There's different ways that people do that. I believe we should do it all. I do believe that. If people want to start an African-centered school, please, we need that. Okay. But guess what? If 85% of our kids go to public schools, we need some brothers and sisters in there teaching them, because most of them are not going to because of money issues and stuff. So my thing is, I'm not trying to look a certain way, sound a certain way. I'm trying to win. At the end of the day, I want to win, and what it takes to win, that's what I support.
Okay.
So I always say self-determination. That's a black nationalist principle. You can't be a black nationalist for real and be talking about, no, I just want to, I love the white man. What you mean? I want to celebrate all these holidays and I never want to have my own. Then you probably should not call yourself a nationalist. But within nationalism, there's different ways we can manifest some of these principles, you know? And again, being colonial subjects, I just wrote an article on this. Our efforts at self-determination are compromised by the fact that it's still on their land and it's still under their rule, and we still gotta get certified from them, permission from them somehow, some way. I agree with you though. I celebrate his holiday every year. I ain't gonna wait for no constitutional whatever, no proclamation. And what we do here in Harlem is we go to his gravesite, he and Sister Betty's gravesite, and have a wonderful sort of experience there. But people celebrate all over the country and the world in their own unique ways, and I support that. As long as we're talking about his principles and what he was teaching and what he was trying to do with his life, that's to me the key.
Yeah.
And at the risk of sounding blasphemous, I have to say this. I used to tell my daughters, you're going to hear about God and universe and all this stuff. I want you to understand, me and your mother are the closest things to God that you're going to probably see. In the sense of, so they could understand, take care of you, help you heal, protect you, feed you, guide you. I think Malcolm X, in many ways, is a messianic figure. I really do. I believe that he went against Jesus was trying to reform the Jews. He said, y'all teaching all this, but you're not doing this. We need to do this different. And they killed him. And he was going against the Roman government, and they killed him. Malcolm did the same. He came to our community and said, no, better way, we got to do this. At some point, he fought for sisters to be in leadership. That was not popular in the OAU. And he was doing different moves, going over to Africa and trying to organize things, And I think some of our people who were rigid and too parochial and too territorial didn't like him and killed him. And I think the government didn't like him for obvious reasons, and they killed him. Very much like Jesus, to me.
Now, brother Ajay, we're running out of time because we're almost at the end of our hour. But I think that the Spike Lee movie on Malcolm X, the one thing that the movie left out was what you just mentioned. Some of his other international travels to Africa and his work around Pan-Africanism.
Yes.
They tell a story, and he just went to Saudi Arabia and went to Mecca and made Hajj, and that was it. They don't talk about how he met with sitting presidents of nations in Africa and his Pan-African work. But before we get off, I know you're also involved in activism around brother Dhoruba bin Wahad. What is the update on that?
It's funny you mentioned it. I tried to hit him up yesterday. He's a busy brother. Let me tell you, for 76 or 77 years of age, the brother gets around. The last I spoke to him, he was doing well. He had a tough period. At one point, he was in Africa, certain region and country of Africa, and the internet had gone out because supposedly some underwater cable was broken. But during that time, he was in a rough place, because he's dependent on being able to access monies and funds and stuff that he couldn't access because he couldn't get to the internet. But he seemed to be in good spirits, and he's very thankful. I know that. He's very humbled by all of the donations. Harlem Liberation School started a GoFundMe to raise $10,000 for him, and we've raised close to $7,000 so far. So we're more than half the way there, and over 100 and maybe 10 people have donated. So it's really a broad-based thing, Some people donated as much as 500. Some have donated 5. And we're thankful. He's very thankful and humbled by the outpouring of generosity by so many people. I know that for a fact.
And if a person wants to donate on GoFundMe, how do they do that?
Oh, man, I'd have to get the GoFundMe. But if they went to GoFundMe and they typed in my name, the campaign would come up for Dhoruba.
Got it. So we're going to send people
I'm the organizer, but the money's going to him, just so y'all know.
Okay,
All the money goes
understood.
straight to the Rupa.
You're not embezzling the money.
No, sir. No,
Okay,
sir. I want
brother
no
Ajay.
parts of that.
Last question on Syracuse University, and it's kind of an aside. Were you there when Donovan McNabb was there?
Yes,
Really?
but here's the thing. I get confused because after I graduated, I worked. I lived in Syracuse and I worked for a few years and then went off to grad school. So I may have been there, but I may have been there as a worker and not there as a student. So that's the only thing. I was definitely there when Derek Coleman was there, when Billy Owens was playing, when what's the short brother's name? The point
No,
guard.
not sport.
I
Where?
Pearl Washington had left before I got there. But so yeah, I was there during that era.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. All right, brother Ajay. We're at the end of our hour. We appreciate your time, brother, and we look forward to talking to you again next week. You mentioned the Move organization, as you mentioned Mumia. I have some questions about John Africa because I feel like there's no real coherent biography on his life, and
Mm,
I feel like his name is kind of a name that's kind of like shrouded in mystery, where I
yeah,
myself don't even know a whole lot about John Africa. So if
nor
we,
do I.
okay,
I think Pam Africa is very vocal. I met her once in Mississippi at a Mississippi conference, and she's on social media. I would say reach out to that sister. She would definitely come on and break it down.
okay, and I have her information. I will definitely do that.
Yeah,
Okay, brother Aj, we're gonna get off of here. We want to thank you for your time again, and we want to send people to Harlem Liberation School on YouTube. That's Harlem Liberation School, and definitely go to GoFundMe and type the name Aj Taimba so that you can donate to the great Daruba bin Wahab.
that's right. And get this book. Stop playing, family. We
Yeah,
need good, strong, clear-minded, competent leadership. Get
search
this
that
book,
name,
man, for
search that
real.
name, and buy those books. I have them myself, and I can say from my lived experience that those books are definitely worth the time and the money and the energy you will spend getting your hands on them.
Much appreciated.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, good brother.
Yes, thank you, man, and we'll talk to you again next month. Okay.
Yes, sir. Peace and black power, family.
All right. Peace.